ကျမကတော့နာမည်ကနှင်းရင်မွန်ကျော်ပါကျမကစီမံကိန်းမန်နေဂျာဖြစ်ချိုင်းဖန်မြန်မာမှာအလုပ်လုပ်နေပါရှင်လက်ရှိပေါ့နော်ဘာကအကြောင်းတစ်ကြောင်းနဲ့တွဲပြီးတော့အလုံးလုံးနေတာရှိပါတယ်အဲ့တော့ဒီစာသင်ခန်းလေးအနေထားလေးကိုတစ်ချက်လောက်ကြည့်ပေးကြပါရှင်
Hi there and thanks for listening. If you're enjoying our podcast and have a recommendation about someone you think we should have on to share their voice and journey with the world, by all means let us know. It could be an aid worker, monastic, author, journalist, scholar, resistance leader, really anyone with some tie or another to the ongoing situation in Myanmar. To offer up a name, go to our website, insightmyanmar.org, and let us know. But for now, just sit back and take a listen to today's episode.နောက်တစ်ခုကျမတို့အတွက်အခက်အခဲရှိနေတာကဒီမိုးရသည်ရောက်လာပြီဆိုလို့ရှိရင်မိုးရွာရင်အကာရန်တွေမရှိတဲ့အတွက်မိုးပတ်ပါတယ်မိုးပတ်တဲ့အတွက်ကြောင့်မို့ကျမတို့ကဒီနေရာမှာစာသင်ရတာကလေးတွေကနေရာရွှေ့ပြီးသွားရတဲ့ဥစ္စာတွေစာမသင်ပဲကြောင်းဖြတ်လိုက်ရတဲ့နေ့တွေရှိနေပါတယ်ရှင်I'm really pleased to bring you the following two interviews conducted by our guest hosts, Sautar. In the ensuing discussions, he examines the role of education in Burmese society and how the failures of the school system have contributed to many of the ongoing problems we see today. Nelson Mandela famously said, "Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world." The inverse of this quote, however, is also true. One of the best ways to prevent change within a society is to limit access, censure what is taught, and stifle creative thought. And the military leadership in Myanmar has been doing exactly this for generations. This was perhaps vividly depicted best by Pascal Htoo Thwe, the author of From the Land of Green Ghosts. His unlikely journey led him from a rural Shan village where classroom learning was all but prohibited to the halls of Cambridge, where he earned a BA in English literature. For those particularly interested in this topic, I'd also like to note our 4 previous episodes addressing education. Episode number 8 features the renowned journalist Thwe Win, who traces his early activism back to his anger at the universities being forced to shut down. Chalteri Nyut talks to us in episode number 40 about how her teachers attempted to instill a sense of nationalistic and religious superiority in her schooling. In episode number 54, the German monk Bhikkhu Mokita describes the holistic monastic school he set up in Yaoundé during the democratic transition period, and the horror of seeing it burned to the ground shortly after the coup. And finally, in episode number 73, La La Win and Yan Minaung describe the augmented reality app they developed, which would have revolutionized learning in Myanmar, yet which all came to a crashing halt with the coup. The interviews that follow here today are no less compelling. We first hear from Terence Thu. As he spent half his schooling in Myanmar and the other half in the US, he's able to provide a contrast between the two styles of learning. In addition, as Terence is from the Karen community, his perspective on the Burmanization policies of the government is especially valuable. He discusses how ethnic language, culture, and history has consistently been overlooked, minimized, and even intentionally written out of textbooks. I should mention that Terence is currently a lobbyist at the US Advocacy Coalition for Myanmar, where he has spent the better part of the last year supporting the Burma Bill. Next up, we hear from Anne, an 18-year-old who is currently attending international school in Yangon. Very few Burmese are able to attend these more privileged institutions, but she was fortunately able to do so with a scholarship. She gives some insight into the curriculum and culture at these schools and how they differ from the country's public schools. Anne shares what she has gained from this experience and how schools have responded first to the COVID pandemic and then to the coup. As we delve deeper into the ongoing crisis in Myanmar, it's important to not only report on recent developments as the conflict intensifies, but also spend time examining how we ended up here. The educational system of a country is charged with instilling knowledge and values in the younger generation. So there's perhaps no better area to bring to lens than education. I'm quite appreciative of the skill and sensitivity which Sotar brings to these interviews. So with that, let me step out of the way and turn the mic over to him in what follows.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to the Inside Myanmar podcast. Today, we are joined by Terrence. Terrence, thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So, before we dive into the basic education system in Myanmar, could you share a little bit about yourself as much as you're comfortable with?
Sure. So I was born in Burma and I immigrated to the United States when I was a teenager. So I pretty much spent half my time in the Burmese education system and then the other half in the US education system. So I sort of have a good idea of both education systems. I can compare and contrast them pretty well. And right now I am working full-time as a researcher. And for my part-time work, I'm, being an advocate for Burma, ever since the coup. So I'm an organizer for the Campaign for a New Myanmar, and I'm also a lobbyist at the U.S. Advocacy Coalition for Myanmar. And I'm just trying to do what I can to help with the things that are going on in Burma so that one day Burma will achieve true democracy.
Thank you. Thank you for everything that you're doing. And so today, the heart of the conversation is how the basic education system, especially the history taught in school, has propagandized or brainwashed the students and the people of Myanmar. And so to begin with that, what are some skills that are valued in the basic education system?
So in the Burmese education system, rote memorization is value. We are expected to memorize really long passages when we're young, and Can I start over that one?
Yeah.
Yeah. So in the Burmese education system, rote memorization is really, really value. And when I was young, we were expected to memorize really long passages, and we were also expected to memorize some of the math steps that we take. So you have to take exact steps and you have to memorize everything, right? So there's no room for critical thinking. There's no room for creativity. It's just about rote memorization. And then in schools, we're also taught to be very submissive. We're supposed to take the teacher's authority as always right, and we're just supposed to follow them. And I want to, say that being submissive is totally different from being respectful, right? You can sometimes disagree with your teacher and be respectful at the same time. But in the Burmese education system, though, you're only expected to be submissive. And then the other thing is they value your test-taking abilities. Everything is test. You don't really get points for doing your homework, doing your classwork. It's really what you get on the test that really determines your grade, your ability, and everything else. And especially in Burma, after your 10th grade, you have the matriculation exam that determines your future, basically. It's just one test, right? One test on the subjects that you're taking. And if you do really well on those tests, your future is more bright. You can do more things. But if you struggle, then you're really gonna have a hard time, in life, because you won't get the necessary score in order to, make it to certain professions that you want to. So definitely, one test determines your future, and that's a system that is very problematic.
Interesting. So it seems like majority of the students have to listen to everything that the teachers teach, and they just have to memorize everything that's in the book and just write them down in the test so that they can advance into another grade or pass the high school so that they can go into the college that they like. And with that comes, the alterations of the history and how the education present the history to the students. And my question is, how have the history books altered the history of Myanmar?
The history books have altered the history of Myanmar in a very, very impactful way. So I'm an ethnic minority. I'm a Karen ethnic from Burma. And so as an ethnic person, I understand the struggles that our people have gone through in the past and our people are going through in the present. But in the textbooks, though, there is no mention of ethnic struggles. For example, they will glorify the Burmese kings of the past, and they never mention the ethnic cleansing that these kings have committed against ethnic minorities, like the Muns, for example. And they made it seem like the ethnic groups were always in harmony, that they were always coming together, working together. They were always united, and they were always subservient to the, Burmese, and, everything was great. But in reality, though, that wasn't the case. For example, right, when Burma gained independence from Great Britain in 1948, there were a lot of ethnic groups that were fighting for their own independence. They didn't want to be part of Burma. They wanted their own separate Karen state. They wanted their own separate, you can just fill in the blank for other ethnic groups. They wanted their own thing, right? And then when we were in school, we never really learned about those things. We just learned that, everybody was working together and fighting against the British, right? But in reality, a lot of the Karen people were siding with the British and fighting the Burmese. So we never really learned that in school. And for example, there was the 1949 Karen Revolution that took place, and that played a big role in Burma's history, but there was no mention of it. I didn't know about it until I was a little bit older, and I was able to do my own research and do my own studies. And of course, obviously there was no mention of the 1962 coup led by General Ne Win, the 1988 uprising, the 2007 Saffron Revolution, the genocide against the Chin, Karen, Rohingya, and other groups, etc. The list goes on. Pretty much the history books never really mention them because they want people to think that Burma is in this harmony, in this little utopia, little bubble where the history was really beautiful and something to be proud of. So they, in a way, brainwash you to be patriotic and love the Burmese culture, to the best of your ability.
Wow. Seems like that's a lot of brainwashing that happens in the education. And what allows this kind of alterations of history to occur in the basic education system?
So pretty much, time, right? Time is what allows it to happen. There was a lot of brainwashing going on over time. Like I mentioned before, the first military coup took place in 1962, right? That's almost 60 years ago. Right, almost 60 years ago. So over that period of time, people get brainwashed generation after generation. So over time, people are just, they don't remember their history. They don't know the true history. When you don't know that history, it's really easy to trick you. It's really easy to brainwash you. And then the other thing was, after the Burmese military took control of the country, they were in control of the television programs, the radio programs, right? They were all run by the military. And because of that, it was really easy to indoctrinate people through those things. The other thing was censorship. Even when, the military would allow Western movies to be shown in Burma, they would censor certain parts so that the Burmese people wouldn't really know about certain things that they shouldn't know according to the military. And in a way, Burma was just closed off from the outside world as well. And the other thing was, the military was really good at carrying out harsh punishments for those who would dissent, who would disagree, right? So if people were to tell other people about the true events that happened, educate other people about the real history, those became people who disagree with the military, and now they're going to be punished. So when you get punished generation after generation, the people who disagree with the military, they have become less public. They have become more quiet. And as a result, a lot of people just don't know about history anymore in the education system. Even the teachers, when they are teaching history, they believe that what they're teaching is true. And they just don't know the difference between what was real and what wasn't real.
I see. So you mentioned that even you as a ethnic minority, didn't know about these propagandizing and the brainwashing until you grow older and start doing research on these topics. So, do the ethnic minorities in Myanmar know about their history?
So it depends on it. It's hard to answer that question with like just a yes or no. I would say it really depends on your upbringing. It depends on where you're living. So I can't speak for every ethnic minority, right? But I can sort of speak for the Korean ethnic group because I belong to that group. So even within the Korean ethnic group, for example, I came from among the Korean people who lived and who built communities closer to the former capital city, Yangon. And because of that, we didn't face as much oppression as our brothers and sisters, our Korean brothers and sisters, who are living and who were living in the eastern part of the country. And because of that, we didn't really because we didn't experience the oppression firsthand. Over time, we forget our history. Over time, we didn't really know like what truly happened. And our parents, didn't tell us, not because like they didn't know, but because like they feared that if we knew, and if we start saying things, we might be in trouble and things like that, right? So there's a lot of like fear and all that going on. So the ethnic minorities group closer to the capital city, we would be more assimilated to the Burmese culture, and then we wouldn't really know our true history. But on the other hand, like the ethnic minorities living, in the border regions or whatever, because they suffered the oppression firsthand, they don't even need to in a way know history, because the history that we felt is their present. So, there's a disparity even within the ethnic groups. So some people know about it, they experience it firsthand. Some people are oblivious to it, and they just think that, everything's fine. So, it's a sad reality, but with more education, with more conversation, with your grandparents, with your parents, with, people who have experienced it firsthand, we can really start to better understand what happened to us in the past. And then we can move on knowing, what went down so that we can improve the future.
Right. And does these kinds of brainwashing, especially the people living closer to the capital cities, do these brainwashings affect their sense of democracy prior to the Spring Revolution?
Yeah, I would say so, right? So democracy, right? Democracy is ruled by the people, right? So for the people to rule, the people need to, come together, and the people need to be informed, right? Informed in order to hold that power. So I want to focus on before 2015, because 2015 is when the NLD party took over, and then they started making reforms in the education system. But before that, though, there were, the education system was 100% controlled by the military. And because of that, in the education that you get from school, education that you get from watching TV, whatever, there were a lot of brainwashing going on. So a lot of people actually saw the ethnic armed organizations like the Korean National Liberation Army or the Kachin Independence Army, right? Those organizations as terrorists. They believe that those organizations are the ones that are bombing their cities, burying landmines so that people will be blown up and things like that. And what that caused is this divisiveness between ethnic groups. People just don't trust each other. And then when people don't trust each other, they don't work together anymore. And when people don't work together anymore, that sense of democracy, that sense of people coming together, being informed and being educated to, hold power in the country, like that is no longer a possibility. So this method, that the military used, I would just call like the divide and conquer strategy, where they would like divide the ethnic groups along those lines. And because the ethnic groups are divided, because they're not united, it is easier to conquer them, right? And then the other thing is definitely before 2015, people were afraid to speak up. I mentioned that earlier too. So they were just worried that what they say, might the military or the spies of the military might hear what they're saying, and then they would be in trouble for that. So then they would be very quiet about it, and they would be like just like say things in a hushed tone, right? But of course, a lot has changed since 2015, since the NLD took over and did a lot of reform in the education system.
I see. And since you mentioned the 2015 general election where Aung San Suu Kyi's NLD party won majority, has the education system been improved since 2015?
Yeah, I would say that, it has improved, or at least, the efforts to improve were underway. For example, there was like increase in funding, right? With education, you really need to put in a lot of money in the right places. I remember when I was in school, my teachers, they were really kind-hearted people, and then they did the best that they could to educate us with the limited resources that they have, right? But when I asked, well, I didn't ask them about their salaries, but like we kind of like know about it. So when I talked to my parents about my teacher salaries, their salaries were very low, and so when salaries are low, obviously fewer people are going to be interested in that position. And when fewer people are going to be interested in that position, there's like a smaller pool for the talent, right? There's a smaller talent pool. And when there's a smaller talent pool, you just like have less talented people showing up to like interview for the job or whatever, or like who were like hired for the job, right? So definitely under NLD there was increase in funding, so the teacher salary they started to increase. There was also more teacher training going on in the right way, and there was also more focus on creativity and critical thinking. Like after 2015, around 2016, people started to talk more about it when they are writing essays, when they are like answering questions or whatever, right? They start to be more creative. They start to think critically. And since 2015, there were also more private schools that opened up. Before we had private schools too, but after 2015 especially, there were more private schools that opened up because the Western countries, or even like prosperous countries in Asia, they started investing in Burma because Burma started to become more democratic, right? So with more investment, there were more private schools. So those schools, they're not indoctrinated with the military agenda. They have their own pedagogy. They have their own ways of teaching kids and inspiring them to be like the best learner that they can be, right? But of course, like there's a limitation to those kinds of school because it's only accessible for the rich. A lot of poor people in Burma, they don't have access to good education. Some people can't even go to school because they have to work to provide for their parents who are sick or whatever. And then the other thing that the NLD implemented, well, not just the NLD, but like the education department in the Ministry of Education in general, like they added sex education too. And sex is a very taboo topic among the Burmese population, but sex education, right? It shouldn't be a taboo topic. It is an important thing for at least kids to know about, so that they can be aware of the dangers that are involved with sex, and then whatever that they have to be aware of, they will know. If they learn it from school in an appropriate setting, they can be more educated about it compared to like if they're learning it from their peers or whatever, where they might learn about like unsafe practices or whatever, right? So definitely there were a lot of improvements since the NLD took over, but sadly I think that progress is going backwards now after the coup.
Right, right. Yeah, it seems like the NLD was on the track of improving the educations and even improving some categories like sex education. But it seems like within 5 years, the process was a little slower than, we might expect it. So why do you think it is hard for NLD to make improvements to the education system?
Old habits rarely die, right? When you're trying to change a culture that has existed for so many years, it's really, really difficult to change it. It's challenging to change something that has been going on for over 50 years, and you can't just change that overnight or even 5 years, right? Throughout the past 50 years or so, the military regime has inhibited critical thinking for those who went to school. And also, a lot of children didn't have access to schooling in the first place because of how poor the country became, right? So they're behind other kids in terms of that. So the NLD had to grapple with all those things, and it's really difficult. It becomes challenging to reform something like that in a short period of time. Of course, they are moving in the right direction, but in order to the best way to make changes is taking the time to change it. You can't change something abruptly, right? You have to change it gradually, and you have to let it evolve slowly over time. That's the best way to change something. So the NLD just need more time, and they just need. But unfortunately, that time we don't have that anymore because we have lost democracy in Burma.
Right, right. And you've mentioned that you have been in both Myanmar and United States education system. So could you give us a comparison between them?
Yeah, of course. For example, in the United States, we care a lot about creativity. But in Burma, it's more about memorization, right? For example, when we're solving math problems, there isn't one right way to solve a math problem. There are certain rules that you have to follow with math, of course, but there are many ways to arrive to the solution of a particular question, right? But in Burma, though, you're expected to follow that one method that your teacher taught you and one method only. Even if you get the answer right, even if all your steps look logically, fine, mathematically acceptable, if you don't follow the way that the teacher taught you, you're going to lose points on that. In the US, it's not like that. If you, as long as, you're following logical math steps, you can, and if you arrive at the answer and it's correct and the steps are fine, you're going to be okay with that. Same thing when it comes to writing essays. In Burma, the teacher write the essay for you, and the teacher got the essay from the government written like curriculum, right? So she copies the essay provided to her by the government from the military, and then she writes it down on the board, and all the kids copy it down. And then you just have to memorize that, and then you don't really, think about what to answer. You just memorize that by heart, and then on the day of the test, you just rewrite it again from your memory. But here in the United States, creativity is value. So when you're doing essays, you have to think about it, and you have to come up with ways to make your arguments and things like that, right? And also, the difference is like critical thinking versus indoctrination. In the United States, in the education system, we value critical thinking, but in Burma, it's about indoctrination. And the example of that, you can see that in the historical passages. I remember when we had to learn about the wars that were happening between Burma and Thailand back in the 18th century. And the questions were basically, the way the questions were asked, they were like opinion-based questions, right? They were like, how successful was this king, for example? Right? They were opinion-based. But we were given with the right answer for that opinion-based question. And we were supposed to memorize that, and then we were expected to write that down word for word on our test, right? So there's no room for thinking about the issue or analyzing and thinking about critically. We don't have a room to criticize what things the king, for example, did wrong during that time. Everything the king did was great according to the essay response, right? But in the U.S., for example, when you think about those same historical passages and essays regarding the historical times, we have to, we can analyze whether a certain president did the right thing or the wrong thing. As long as we can back up our opinion with facts and evidence, it's really good. And then the other thing is innovation versus conformity, right? Even in something like art class. When I was in elementary school, we were taught to draw like a dog in a certain way, and we were only allowed to draw it that way, or a fish in a certain way and only that way. But of course, in the United States, there are guidelines, but you can let your innovative ideas flourish and your creativities flourish, right? So yeah, that's pretty much it.
I see. And another thing that I want to touch on is the after-school tuitions in Myanmar. I believe this is a big part of the education culture in Myanmar, where students, go to after-school tuition. So could you explain us a little bit about that culture?
Yeah, so after-school tuition is basically extra tutoring, right? Extra tutoring after school. And usually the same teacher who was your teacher at school will be your tutoring teacher too. And so you basically relearn everything that you have learned in class in that tutoring session. And so in my experience, right, when I was in elementary school, our class was about 80 people, and we only had one teacher. So imagine, like, even in the United States, if there's like one teacher and like 30 students, that's already a lot to manage, right? But so imagine one teacher with 80 students, with 80 third graders. Imagine how difficult that is for the teacher. Like, I didn't think about it back then, but like, it's a lot of people, right? So because of that, in class, you don't really learn a lot of, the teacher cannot give you the one-on-one focus that you need, right? So then you need that after school tutoring. At home, the teacher will come to your house, and then you will be with like 5 or 6 other of your friends, and then she would basically reteach you the same things, the same math problems, the same English passages, whatever, right? And then you because of that repetition, because of that exposure, again, you would do better than you normally would. But the problem with that kind of system is that I came from a family that my parents weren't rich, but they weren't poor as well, so they were able to afford that after school tutoring. But a lot of the kids, they can't afford that. So imagine like not getting enough not getting the one-on-one attention that they need in class, and then they don't even have that extra help, so they're gonna struggle. But for me, or for my peers who were in that after school tutoring, because we had that extra help, we had that relationship with our teacher, like that closer relationship with our teacher, we tend to do better in school because of that, right? So you can already see it's an unfair system. And then the other reason why we kind of need the after school tutoring is also because the teacher, her salary is very low, or his salary is very low, so they kind of need to do additional tutoring, additional work in order to get supplement income. Only then they will be able to live, earn a livable wage.
I see. So it seems like the more privileged and the richer you are in Myanmar, the better education you receive. And it seems really unfair to me. And as someone who has, studied on the topic, like you, if you were given the chance, where would you start to improve the education system in Myanmar in order to achieve a system where it is fair for everyone, and it is not about memorization, but about critical thinking and creativity?
Yeah, it needs to be a multifaceted approach, because you can't just, try to solve one part, right? You have to think about it in a big approach. So this question is sort of challenging to, answer, and then just give you a few points. But a few things that we'll need to look at is basically we have to change people's mindset, right? That people have been indoctrinated for so long that they don't really have critical thinking. If you ask them to copy a passage, they will memorize it and they'll be really great at it. But if you ask them to think and then process their thought and then write an argument piece, a lot of people, a lot of adults, and even some students in Burma right now, they're going to struggle with that. So we need to change that mindset, and that's going to take time though. So we just have to be patient with it, and then we just have to start fostering creativity and critical thinking and instill that ability to make logical arguments and back up your arguments with evidence and all that in the minds of our students. And then the other important thing is to invest in the teachers. The teachers, the role of the teacher is very important. They are the ones who are going to inspire the next generation, right? So because of that, they need to be trained better. They need to be trained appropriately. They need to have the skill sets that they need in order to teach other people critical thinking and creativity. And the other thing is they need to be paid more. They need to be paid what they're worth. And I know that, teachers being underpaid is not a problem, not just exclusive to Burma. It's also, applicable in the United States as well. But it's much worse in Burma for sure, because teachers are very poor in Burma. And so they need to get paid more so that they get what they deserve. And when, a salary is competitive, more people are going to come for it. And when like I said, earlier, it's all about the talent pool, right? When more people come after a job, the talent pool is wider, bigger. So then, there's a higher chance of, getting the people who are more qualified and more talented to work for that position. And lastly, the important thing is to reach the unreachable. Education needs to be accessible to everyone in Burma. A lot of kids today in Burma, they are not going to school. They're working. I've seen on the streets, I've seen a lot of 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old kids working. They're selling things so that they can provide for their parents, right? That's not acceptable. I understand why they have to work, right? They have to feed themselves. They have to feed their parents. If they don't work, then their family has to struggle, right? So I don't blame them for having to work, but I blame the system for putting them there in the first place. So we need to make sure that the poorest people in Burma, the poor people in Burma, they have what they need so that they can focus on education, right? So when you think about like the Maslow hierarchy of like needs, right? You need to first have that foundation of like safety, that love, right? So only then you can go to the next step, and then you can finally reach like self-actualization, right? So same thing with education. In order to focus on education, those kids, they need to live in like safe places. They need to be able to eat decent meals every single day. They can't, they shouldn't have to go hungry when they sleep, right? Things like that. So we need to have a system that is more equitable for the people in Myanmar so that they will be able to focus more on education and things like that instead of worrying for what they're going to eat the next day.
Right. And those are really good points for improving the education system as well as the entire, system in Myanmar. And as we know, in the past 5 months, people have been strongly opposing the military government. And the Spring Revolution and civil disobedience movements are proof of how much the military government is disliked by the people. So could this be the beginning of a fight against a century-old brainwashing education system?
So I wouldn't say this is the beginning of a fight against a century-old brainwashing education system. I would say that the fight has been going on for many years as well. For example, in 1988, in 2007, in other parts of history, right? The fight has always been there. But I would say that this is definitely a turning point. A turning point because in 2008, right, the military wrote the 2008 Constitution of Burma. And they basically paved the way for a quasi-democracy where Burma will be in a state of democracy, but they will still have control over a lot of things. Back then, it wasn't true reform, right? It seemed like there was true reform after the 2007 saffron revolution, but it wasn't really true reform. It was just a reform in disguise that the military used so that they can benefit from it. The 2008 constitution, for example, right, it allows the military to retain 25% of the seats in both chambers of the legislative body in Burma, and because they have 25% of the seats, the constitution can never be changed because it needs more than 75% of the members to vote against the constitution to basically absolve it, right? So then the military are always going to hold that power. And then the other thing is the 2008 constitution also gave them control over the Ministry of Home Affairs, Ministry of Defense, and ministries like that, right? Where a lot of the things that affect the country on a day-to-day basis was still controlled by the military. So the Spring Revolution, though, it's now a turning point for sure, because we're not going back to that kind of format where we seem to have democracy, but the military is still controlling a lot of the stuff. Now we have an opening to uproot the military completely. So we really have to take full advantage of this. And when we succeed, right? And I'm not saying if we succeed, because I know we will succeed, but it's just a matter of time. But it's going to be a long fight, so we just have to keep fighting. So when we succeed, we can change the education system.
Right. And the combinations of COVID and the coup, doesn't really help the students in Myanmar, because since COVID, I believe the schools have been closed, and now that the country is, under the military juntas, a lot of students are participating in the civil disobedience movements. So they are not going back to school. And so, do you know any efforts that have been put in for those students who are participating in the CDM?
So yeah, regarding that, I know that the Ministry of Women, Youth and Children Affairs, they are trying to provide online education for some students as well. Again, like their ability is limited. What they can do is limited because of the limited resources that they have, but they're definitely trying to do that. And then I know for sure that in some places they the communities they're coming together, the churches, the monasteries coming together so that they can provide education for their kids when the kids are not being able to go to school because of COVID, and because they're participating in the civil disobedience movement, right? And one thing I want to say about education is that you don't need to go to school to be educated, right? Especially a school that is just going to brainwash you. If you go to that school, you're going there to be uneducated. You're not going there to be educated. So education doesn't need to be formal. Education can be gained in a way where there's critical thinking going on. There is room for innovative thinking. And then education can take place when you're open-minded about things and you are having conversations with people. So it doesn't need to be in a formal school setting. It can take place anywhere else, other places, and it can take place through your experience as well. So I just want to touch on that as well.
I see. Thank you for touching on the importance of not being able to go to school, but still being educated in the field that you want to be educated in. That is really important for the people in Myanmar, especially, to understand. So lastly, is there anything you would like to share about your experience or educate the listeners of the podcast? Right. And thank you so much for touching on that topic of, not being able to go to school doesn't mean that you're not going to be educated anymore, because it is important for the people in Myanmar, especially, to understand that you don't have to go to school to be educated in the field that you want to be in. So thank you for that. And lastly, is there anything you would like to share about your experience or educate the listeners of the podcast? or let them know of how they can help in the fight against the outdated education system, or just the fight against the juntas in general?
Yeah, I like this quote from Nelson Mandela. He said that education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. So education is definitely the answer to fight against the military regime that is holding power right now. And then in order for this kind of education to happen, we need to be able to look back and also look ahead. So looking back, we need to be able to look back at our history, which has a lot of conflicts. We need to acknowledge the mistakes that we have done. We need to admit that we mistreated ethnic minorities and other marginalized groups. We need to heal together as the people of Burma. And most importantly, we need to learn not to repeat the mistakes that we have done in the past. And only then we'll come together and we'll be able to work together in order to topple this military regime. And then after we look back and we learn from looking back, we need to look ahead. We need to look ahead by focusing on critical thinking and innovation. We need to undo the damage that has been done by the military in the past 50 years or so. We need to, they have done a lot of damage. So we need to really undo that damage and move forward. We need education. We really need educated people in various sectors to rebuild the country as well, right? So we need to really invest in the future and be able to have educated people who are going to lead the country in different ways. So we also need to be hopeful for the future as well. And lastly, I just want to say that, this is a fight that we will win, but it is also a fight that is very long. It is going to be a marathon. So we need to be patient and we need to keep on fighting no matter how hard it is. And the important thing is to continue to be kind to one another, to continue to be supportive of one another as we keep on fighting. And only when we're united, only when we are working together, we'll be stronger than the military regime, right? The one thing the military regime had against us all those years ago is the division that they have caused among us. But with more education, with more open-mindedness, with more conversation flowing from one ethnic person to the next, when we start to listen to each other more and when we become more kind to each other, we can become a collective that is really strong. And with our strength together, we can topple the military regime forever.
All right. Thank you very much, Terrence, for your time. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Spirit House 6. The Knots had moved into the house on Inya Lake. Zoomed through halls with pocket knives, tamarind seeds, green bananas. Family offerings of jade bracelets, cheroot cigars, deer tails. The medium danced wildly in the living room, drunk on palm wine, spinning. Orchestra of circle drums and copper bells played on the staircase. Not Pue. 8 children on the floorboards, leaping over uncles and cousins, shaking. Mother lit candles on the wall shrine. She spoke to the blue-winged insects. They whispered back. Auntie walked in a dream state. Hot room. Cousin slowly opened a large trunk of teak and silver strips. The knots flew inside, one after the other. This poem is from Storage Unit for the Spirit House on Omni Dawn by Mashane Lin.
For our second guest, we are joined by Anne. Anne, thank you for joining the Inside Myanmar podcast.
Thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure.
All right. So could you tell us a little bit about yourself, as much as you're comfortable with?
Well, I'm Anne, and I'm an 18-year-old Burmese international student. I have been to an international school my entire life, and you can ask me anything you want.
All right. Thank you so much for that. So in the first part of our podcast, we talked about the basic education system in Myanmar, but I believe the international schools in Myanmar have a very different education system and curriculum.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And since you were an international student in Myanmar, can you share us about the way your school's education system is structured?
Yeah. So, well, my school is an American curriculum-based private international school that offers knowledgeable subjects going from arts to sciences, history to sport, and since it's an American curriculum-based school, the system is designed in a way that prepares you for further education in the U.S. generally, I would say that. And it familiarizes you with the American culture as well. So, for example, we have grades K through 12, a student government. We celebrate events that are not traditionally celebrated in Burma, and we also have similar beginning and ending school years, the dates. So to elaborate on the last two examples that I gave, a day that we celebrate would be October 31st, Halloween. And in Burma, we don't celebrate Halloween at all. It's not a part of our tradition or culture. Nope. So in our schools, we celebrate that. And we also have student governments making, haunted houses and such, with the school faculty acting as a backbone and so on. And as I mentioned, the school years are also, they're structured in a way that is similar to American schools, I would say. We begin the school year in late August and end in early June, which, is a complete difference from government schools, which start in June. Yeah, June to March. Yeah. And regarding the education system, though, for international schools, the core subjects that we have through, grades K through 8 are math, science, English, of course, history, art, physical education, ICT, and a foreign language class. In high school, though, you get the freedom to create your own quote-unquote course as long as you reach the required credit score to graduate. And we also have the typical standardized textbooks, and classroom sizes are around like 20, maximum 20, I think. And in my class, we only had 8 students. So there was a lot of one-to-one attention from the teachers to students and vice versa, We also have advanced placement courses and exams. Yeah. And there are also several kind of international schools. We got American, like I said, British, and so many more that I can't really list on top of my head right now. And most of them are also located in Yangon, the largest city as well. in my personal experiences of having gone to both government school and international school, I would say there are major, like I emphasize on major differences. And in my opinion, I mean, they're all understandable. Not everyone can afford to go to a private international school. And like, I was one of those people, but I'll dive into that later. But I would like to mention that a key difference between these two systems are that in international schools, we are required to speak in English, whether it is during class or just, having casual conversations with your friends. Yeah.
Wow, interesting. Okay, so from what you said, it seems like the international schools in Myanmar has this atmosphere that's filled with both culture from Myanmar and the international the country that they're based on. That is pretty interesting to learn. And so, from your experience, what kind of skills are taught and learned in school?
So, in my opinion, I think actually, I believe that international schools students actually are encouraged to think more critically and creatively rather than memorizing like insurmountable work. And we we actually favor hand-on experiments like science experiments and events. Just we really promote learning about life, and preparing yourself for the future, the life that you'll have in the future and the experiences that will come with it, and just preparing you for, like I said, what's supposed to come. So, and we also really celebrate art, music, and just being independent as a student, as a person, and also just being able to express yourself as who you are, then being shaped.
Right. So, that is, very different from what the basic education system in Myanmar offer, because they emphasize more on the memorizations over all that you have mentioned. So, what does it mean to be an international student in Myanmar? Because it is, vastly different from being a student in a basic education system. And what are the benefits of being an international school student in Myanmar?
That's actually a really good question. Hold on. I think for this question, I'll just list a few things down and just elaborate on them.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think, like I said, there's a lot of creative freedom for us. By this, I mean that the teachers they're really supportive of our choices when it comes to the subjects that we take or creative content that we produce. In my school, we have this extracurricular class called drama class, but I think they're changing the class now to like film and something along the lines of film, because basically what we did on there was we created a TV show called The Den on behalf of the school, and we literally had all the creative control. Like, us students had the creative control while also staying in touch with the school's faculty for the uploading of the shows or such as. And I would say it was a really fun experience, and it made me learn so much about not only video editing or acting, but also the importance of communication with people and the connections that we have with them. And I really think that truly represents international schools really well, like preparing you for the real world. Like I said, I think international schools really help you think out of the box and really find who you are as a person rather than, like I said, being a cookie cutter straight A student. I mean, I'm not saying they're not competitive or anything because they are truly competitive, but I'm just saying they allow you to think more independently and become a more independent person. Yeah. But even if you don't get straight A students, there's literally no need to worry because there's, like I said, there's a high teacher to student attention, and the teachers will genuinely help you earn better grades if you're, truly struggling with a subject. And wow, I sound like a marketing manager right now, but yeah, I truly mean it. And and by independency, I think having a student government plays a big role in supporting that statement as well, because like I said, you get control of planning different events and many more. I was in a STUCO. We just call it, student council, but we call it STUCO for short. I was in STUCO for a couple of school years, and we planned and created so many events like talent shows, haunted houses, dance nights, fundraisers. Yeah, and just a lot more that we did. Another thing would be that being an international student also means going to school trips, the fun part. There are typically and generally, there are two school trips that are most notable in my school. The Week Without Walls trip and the Learning Across Borders trip. The Week Without Walls trip is just a high school retreat where we go to different locations around Burma each year and learn about different cultures and practices. So, for example, back in 2019, before all this COVID started, we went to Mandela and we literally stayed on an island, isolated island for 2 days. 2 days, I think, yeah. Of course, there was already a pre-existing village and the people there, but I think it was the first time for our students to shower from a water tank with a little cup,
Wow.
outdoors with their longi on. Yeah, I think
Right,
it was
right.
the first time for them. But like I said, life experiences. Yeah.
Wow,
For yeah, for learning across borders, though, the other school trip it's more of a global competition, environmental science competition that takes place in different countries each year, though. And in 2018, I participated in the competition, which took place in Vietnam. Yeah, Vietnam. And my partner and I conducted a project called Plants versus Pollutants. Don't cringe because I don't know what we were thinking when we came up with that name too, but I think it's pretty fitting for our project because we conducted an experiment on how aloe vera can significantly reduce pollution in your house and such. Well, yeah, I'm speaking from my personal experiences, but I think international schools in general, almost every international school, have a Week Without Walls trip and some form of global competition going on every year. And as an international student, you could also get experiences from a very diverse community. For example, in my class alone, there were only four of us were Burmese students, and the other four were international students. So, and lastly, the most important thing, being an international student means you get a discount at Gongcha. Yeah.
All right, thank you very much. And it seems like being an international students just give you, like a lot of experience that you cannot experience in the basic education high school. And also, when you were talking about, the school, you mentioned about, going the school preparing you for what it comes next, if you want to study in the United States and such. So, are there any benefits for international students who would like to study abroad?
Yeah, I would say that I mean, naturally, as an American curriculum school, it prepares you mostly for an American college, but you are free to go anywhere you like, basically to go for college, any country that you like. It only matters that you talk to your counselor about it and your applications. You're free to do whatever you want, actually. Yeah.
Awesome. I see. So, you mentioned that majority of the international schools are based on Yangon, right? So, could you tell me how accessible are the international schools in Myanmar for the people who are not in Yangon or who are also in Yangon but are not privileged enough, to be able to attend the international schools?
Well, I mean, I think there are around like 25 international schools in Yangon. So, in a sense, I would say that it is pretty accessible, like picking a school wise, but in the same way, it's not accessible because the schools are expensive. They're expensive. They're like paying your college tuition. That's how much money you have to pay. Because, oh, the fees. Oh my gosh. Like, my school is considered one of the cheapest schools, international schools, and the fees are already like 10,000 USD a year. Yeah. There are even more prestigious international schools that you can go, which they can reach up to like 20,000 or a year or even more. So most students that are there, they're either really rich or they're there with a scholarship.
So it seems like the international schools give out some sort of scholarships that could be accessible for the people who are not in Yangon but are passionate to be an international students. So thank you for the information. And so moving on to the next question. I see. So the international schools provide some sorts of scholarships for the people who would like to attend but are not privileged or do not have enough, money to put into the education. So could you elaborate a little bit more on how to apply for the scholarships?
Yeah, got you. So, regarding scholarships, I mean, I was a scholarship student as well because, I cannot afford a school like that, So, for my process though, it's different for most students, but for my process, I was offered a scholarship I was offered a scholarship, from my school. And what I did was I went there. I had an interview for me. I had an interview. We just discussed on a lot of things. They looked over my grades and I got into the school in the middle of the year. But for other students, so regarding the scholarships, I think it's a different process for everyone, but for my school, what I had to do was I was actually offered a scholarship because I can't afford an international school to go to an international school. That was just expensive, you know. But I was offered a scholarship. I went to the school. I looked around. They looked over my grades. I had an interview, and I basically got into the school. But for they do a background check on you too, you know, whether you deserve the scholarship or not. But for other stories that I've heard of, they had to take a placement test if they weren't offered, you know, the scholarship, and they had to take a placement test, and then that's how they got the scholarship. And different people get different amounts of scholarship as well. It's just like a college. Yeah.
I see. So since 2019, I believe the international school experience might be a little bit different from, the past years because COVID, the pandemic happened, and then right after the coup happened. So, how has the COVID and the coup impacted the students?
Ooh, that's an interesting question. Oh, well, the COVID and the coup, the combo that we never needed, but now we do. But, 2020 doesn't seem so bad anymore after living in 2021. But yeah, ever since the coup started, COVID started, ever since COVID started, like most of the students around the world, we just immediately went to online classes. We had to cancel all of our school events, and all year long, it was just, longing to meet your friends and a lot of online homework submissions. But I mean, thankfully and rightfully, my school was really flexible with, our submission dates. And personally, I can't believe I really thought my graduation year would be better. And I really had high hopes for it. But then, boom, the military staged a coup. It wasn't pleasant, I would say, having to leave class abruptly because the soldiers were in your neighborhood throwing tear gas, grenades, or just like shooting bullets at your house, and just waking up and seeing dead bodies on your social media in the morning before going to class, that was pretty atrocious. But oh wait, hold on. I think that was before we had internet access anyways. Like before the military cut off our internet access, so we couldn't even go to our classes. And it was especially worse because, like, personally for me, for my own safety, it wasn't safe around my neighborhood. So for my own safety, I had to go to a more rural area for my own safety, like I said. And the internet was so bad. I couldn't go to class. I couldn't take my exams. It was a struggle, but it was a stressful time for everyone, for every international student, for not only international student, but every student in general, everyone in general, And I would say that we are very privileged and blessed because despite the coup going on and COVID, we were able to, resume with our classes when on the other hand, government school students, they haven't been able to go to school since COVID started because they have just a larger number of students in their classes, and it wouldn't be that possible to have an online meeting, for them. So I would say that you gotta look at the bright side, even though it's not ideal for what a student should be going through, And I think the coup really deteriorated our mental health as well. But personally, for my school, they became even more flexible with our submission dates, and it's just not, like I said, not ideal for what a class should be like. And the teachers understood that as well, personally. I mean, not personally, for our class, I meant. And even when we went out to protest, the teachers, they did not stop us, because they understood us. But some of our students were, they were really angered that the teachers were preventing them from going to protests or attending different demonstrations. And I think that's for the younger grades though, but for high schoolers like me, we, the teachers, they're obligated to stay neutral despite their political stances. They're as a school, they're obligated to stay neutral because for a school environment, it's their job to give knowledge and provide education for anyone. They're not supposed to judge, they're not supposed to give input on what political party you're supposed to, which political stance you should be on. So it was kind of frustrating for some students because the teachers were, encouraging them to stay and learn instead of going out. But even if we did go out, they were still supportive of us. And I think, not that I think, it really was a hard time for us just having to be concerned for our lives even when we were just simply studying, And it's some of my classmates, and including me, we would go to protests and there's just like a crackdown and blood everywhere. It wasn't, like I said, it's not ideal for what a high schooler or just a student in general should be going through. We should be enjoying our high school life, our student life, our teenage years, but because of this coup and COVID, we're not having that. Yeah, so I think it really took a mental toll on us, but we're doing our best. Yeah.
And I'm sorry that you had to go through this experience amid the coup, especially, your graduation year. This is just a terrible experience, and I believe no one should, go through that experience. And in the past couple of months, there have been a lot of conversations about how, ethnic minorities in Myanmar has been experiencing the discriminations by the majorities in Myanmar. So, have you or has anyone, especially someone who is an ethnic minority, ever faced any form of discriminations when you were in school?
So, as I'm trying to think of a moment right now, but I really can't, honestly. But as a member of an ethnic minority, I would say no. I think as an international school, my school was very accepting, and they're obligated to be accepting of all kinds of people, And instead of discrimination, I think we celebrate the different ethnicities and culture instead. For example, like every year, we would have, the Jan festival, and during this Dajan festival, the school would just organize a performance program, and the students would perform different ethnic dances or songs, or just the Dajan songs, And I think it was in 2019. Yeah, so back in 2019, before the whole pandemic hit, we actually had to perform a song about celebrating different ethnicities, like I said, in Burma, while little kids in their traditional clothes, of course, of different ethnicities, danced. And it was so wholesome. I wish everyone could see it. Everyone should see it. It was so wholesome. Like the little kids were so cute. But yeah, like I said, I think despite us as a country being notorious for, I mean, not us as a country, but the Burmese military, as much as they are notorious for oppressing the ethnic minorities, us as an international school community, we are actually very accepting and we celebrate the differences in our cultures. Yeah.
I see. That's really good to hear, that everyone is treated the same and everyone's culture is valued in the school. So, with that, what are some flaws or issues that you want to improve in your school?
Well, that's an interesting question, but I would say as an international school that is very expensive, it's it what comes along with it is hiring competent teachers. So my school is fairly new, but the school has so many competent teachers that are very well skilled in their own specific subjects. But as a growing school, and like most international schools, there will be teachers that are teachers or just members of the faculty who are not competent enough. And it's always a learning experience for the school as well. So I don't want to name names, but there was one teacher, not a teacher, one person in our school what most students would believe wasn't competent enough to be a part of the school and to be a part of the school. So what happened was, like I said, it was a learning experience for the school. The school fired them, and but I think personally for my school, they're really quick to fix some issues that are not right with, but it doesn't go the same for all the other schools. There are flaws there are flaws everywhere. But another thing, my school is not heavily, I don't think they're affiliated with the military, but some of the most prestigious schools, they're heavily affiliated with the military, and as a result, they also received social punishment. But because they were so heavily affiliated with the military, some of them had to pick a side, and some of them chose the military side, and they got a lot of backlash for it. But what comes along with being affiliated with the military is favoritism towards the military kids, or just favoritism towards the richer kids. And I think that is really corrupting, but you can't really do anything about it. You could call them out and stuff, but I don't think you can really do anything about favoritism, because technically saying, that's how the school survives. They need to have the money from these people, these rich people, for them to stay working. So I think favoritism is a big issue and a flaw that I would like to point out in my school and just any other school. And favoritism.
Interesting. So, since you mentioned that some international schools, had to pick a side, sort of, when the coup happened, because they're heavily affiliated with the military. What happened to the students who does not receive favor, who are not the military kids or who are not rich enough, but going to school on scholarships and stuff? So what happened to to those students?
Well, this is kind of funny, but I truly believe that they are so much more they're so underappreciated, and their efforts are not easily seen. They're just not, I don't think they're that recognized. I mean, I feel like people who are in that position, they deserve a lot more than what they give out. Yeah.
I see. So, for those schools, is there any civil disobedience from the students? Just like how majority of the students from basic education high schools participated in CDM when the school reopened, because majority of the basic education high schools are affiliated with the military.
Yeah, there were. There are so many cases of social punishment. Even the school that the senior general Myanmar, his grandchildren, the schools that they went to, they were heavily punished. They're even the school. I don't want to name names, but there's this big and very prestigious international school in Burma that made a post on Facebook of how they were thankful that the military was giving them vaccines and stuff, and people boycotted them so much, and just even their own students, they started quitting schools and in support of the civil disobedience movement, and just to in a form of protest. There are lots of social punishment and just quitting schools going on right now. Yeah.
I see. And one thing I would like to talk about in the education system, and I guess in the culture in Myanmar, is that in the basic education system, there's a culture where students go to after school tuitions, because they feel like, or sometimes what the teachers teach in school is not enough for students, and they have to take the after school tuitions in order to be on top of their classes. So does that kind of culture exist in the international school education system?
Yes, I would say. But it's mostly for standardized exams like SATs. There are students who take after school tuitions for not standardized exams related stuff, but it's mostly, I think it's pretty different from what Burmese government schools offer, because the the after school tuitions that international schools mostly go to are for help with their homework, or just to receive assistance while they do their work. And like I said, it's mostly for SAT related purposes. Yeah. And or just like AP exam related purposes. Yeah. But I'm not, I can't really talk much about on this subject because I never went to a after school tuition, because they're super expensive as well, more than what I can afford. So, but they're really helpful, and a lot of students go there actually. Yeah.
I see. But would you say those after school tuitions are needed in order to be able to, to stay on top of your class in international schools?
Personally, I don't think so. Because you can ask your teacher who's teaching the subject about it, because I don't think the experience and the learning styles are the same between two teachers. So I think it's best to just ask your subject teacher about it instead of going to another after school tuition. But I think if you're really struggling and just need extra practice or just need help from just to learn a different method of calculating something or learning something, then I think it's helpful. But it really depends on the person and how much help they need. Yeah.
Right. And lastly, is there anything that you would like to share or you would like to educate the listeners of this podcast?
Well, regarding international schools, I think it's just a privilege to be able to go to an international school during these times or just any time in general, because there's a vast range of differences when it comes to international schools versus government schools. So if a listener is planning to go to a international school, I wouldn't recommend now. Maybe try like online classes, but I think it's just better to. I think the education quality is also a lot better compared to what government schools can offer, and you just experience a lot of different aspects in life and what you can do and what your potential is. But doesn't mean that government schools are bad as well. They have their own pros and cons, but generally I think international schools would be a better option for someone who can afford it, or if you want to apply for a scholarship or anything, just go ahead for it, just ask the school for it. And just, I think there's only for you to go up if there's only like positive things and just pros that can come to you that you'll, achieve when going to an international school from a government school. But not everyone, like I said, not everyone can afford to go to an international school. But if you really want to, like I said, just ask for a scholarship from the school, research more on it. It's just like finding a college, just research more on your international schools, because I think they can genuinely give you like better education and knowledge on certain things. I hope that made sense. Yeah.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to this show. I realize that this is an enormously difficult time for many people who love Myanmar these days, myself included. And at times we might despair that there's anything at all we can do to stop the horrors unfolding there. However, just the mere fact of staying informed is helping to bear continued witness and keep a focus on this issue when much of the international media has moved on. And the only way that we can do our part in continuing to provide this content is through the support of generous donors, listeners like yourselves. If you found this episode of value and would like to see more shows like it, please consider making a donation to support our efforts. Both monthly pledges or one-time donations are equally appreciated. Thank you deeply in advance. If you would like to join in our mission to support those in Myanmar who are being impacted by the military coup, we welcome your contribution in any form, currency, or transfer method. Your donation will go to support a wide range of humanitarian missions, aiding those local communities who need it most. Donations are directed to such causes as the Civil Disobedience Movement, CDM, families of deceased victims, internally displaced person (IDP) camps, food for impoverished communities, military defection campaigns, undercover journalists, monasteries and nunneries, education initiatives, the purchasing of protective equipment and medical supplies, COVID relief, and much more. We also make sure that our donation fund supports a diverse range of religious and ethnic groups across the country. We invite you to visit our website to learn more about past projects as well as upcoming needs. You can give a general donation or earmark your contribution for a specific activity or project you would like to support, perhaps even something you heard about in this very episode. All of this humanitarian aid work is carried out by our nonprofit mission, Better Burma. Any donation you give on our Insight Myanmar website is directed towards this fund. Alternatively, you can also visit the Better Burma website, betterburma.org. That's BETTERBURMA.org, and donate directly there. In either case, your donation goes to the same cause, and both websites accept credit cards. You can also give via PayPal by going to paypal.me/betterburma. Additionally, we take donations through Patreon, Venmo, GoFundMe, and Cash App. Simply search Better Burma on each platform and you'll find our account. You can also visit either the Insight Myanmar or Better Burma websites for specific links to those respective accounts, or email us at info@betterburma.org. If you'd like to give in another way, please contact us. Thank you so much for your kind consideration and support.